Welcome to our workshop about microaggressions, hosted by Muslim Children's Aid and Support Services and funded by Heritage Canada. In today's workshops, we'll learn how to identify microaggressions and build strategies to stop them and dismantle them. Our agenda for today is to start by understanding microaggressions and then connect that to DEI. We will also provide some real-world examples and leave some space for some reflection and discussions, and also ways of responding to microaggression, also preventing them. And then last is how we can move forward and commit to a positive change. Our goals for today's workshops are to gain a clear understanding of what microaggressions are and their impact on individuals and workplace culture. Another goal is to really learn to recognize the various forms of microaggressions, such as microassaults, microinsults, and microinvalidations. We're hoping that you also develop practical strategies for effectively responding to microaggressions, both if you are a target and as a supportive witness, and then also to commit to building a more inclusive and respectful environment by applying learned insights and behaviors in daily interactions. To start, it's important to recognize what microaggressions are and what is a microaggression. So it is a brief and commonplace verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults towards people from marginalized groups. So these small interactions might seem minor in isolation, but their reoccurring effect can be deeply damaging, and they're often rooted in stereotypes and that unconscious bias and ingrained social stereotypes that we have if we're not being aware of them. So over time, it really impacts mental health, sense of belonging, and psychological safety in the workplace. So to really expand on it, as we said, microaggressions are really slight verbal, behavioral, or environmental comments or sayings that really target marginalized groups that are based on gender, race, disability, religion, or any other identities a person might have. Most often, not always though, as the case, they are unintentional. They're comments that we make or actions that we have without knowing it, just because it arrives from those biases that we hold. And then there's three forms of them. So microassaults are deliberate attacks. Micro-insults are rude or insensitive comments, and then micro-invalidations are dismissing experiences or feelings. And they function by reinforcing stereotypes. They also create feelings of exclusion and maintain power imbalances. They also send messages that certain people don't fully belong or aren't valued equally in a workplace. So the cumulative impact. The repeated nature of microaggression contributes to chronic stress, reduced well-being, feelings of invisibility, and decreased engagement. Awareness and reflections are essential for creating inclusive, equitable environments. So how do microaggressions relate to DEI? For diversity, microaggressions push marginalized identities away and weaken diverse environments by making people feel unwelcome or devalued. For equity, they reflect and reinforce power imbalances, creating unfair barriers to advancements, recognition, and fair treatment. They also make people feel excluded, unheard, or unsafe, which is the opposite of true inclusion, where all voices matter. So a lot of the time, microaggressions can be slight comments. So if we're making slight comments to, for instance, women in the workplace, we are again perpetuating those stereotypes that women don't belong in certain workplaces. Or if we're talking about someone that is from a different presenting identity, again, we're using those stereotypes and unconscious biases to make comments without realizing how we're just, again, perpetuating and reinforcing certain stereotypes. We'll further explore how microaggressions contradict DEI and how they come against that framework. So they undermine diversity by sending subtle messages that some identities are less valued or don't belong, whether, as previously mentioned, it's comments against women or those presenting as a different identity than us. It can be towards immigrants or people from different socioeconomic statuses and backgrounds. Microaggressions also reflect unequal power dynamics, and they reinforce systematic inequities. So they create barriers to fair treatment, professional growth, and psychological safety. And we often can see this with women in the workplace who have to choose between being career driven or having a family, where we see that those, with children or have other commitments are unable to hold higher positions of leadership, even though men that also have families tend to hold the same positions. It's because, again, of those biases that we hold and perceived kind of notions of an individual. And the way microaggressions come against inclusion, they cause exclusion, invisibility, and emotional harm. So really standing against everything inclusion is for. And these are all important in recognizing how they oppose frameworks that we're putting in different institutions, but even showing why it's very essential that we're calling them out and we're stopping them. So as previously explored, there are various types of microaggressions, and they manifest in various forms, each carrying distinct characteristics and impacts. By recognizing these different types, it helps us identify them in our daily interactions and understand their harmful effects on colleagues and workplace culture. Microassaults are the most obvious form of microaggression. These are purposefully conscious attacks that are meant to hurt or shame someone based on their identity. So, for example, if we're using slurs or displaying offensive symbols, or even making explicitly discriminatory remarks, these are all microassaults. So, oftentimes they are purposeful and they are meant to exclude or demean. They are usually easier to identify and call out than different forms, and they often also constitute clear harassment or discrimination. So, micro insults are more subtle, and they are often unintentional but reveal underlying biases. So, for example, if someone's saying that they're articulate and saying that with a surprise expression, that can imply that, that opposes what they're supposed to be, that they're not supposed to be articulate based on something of their identity. Or if we're saying, where are you really from? We're again perpetuating that if you are, if you look different than a lot of other individuals, you're not from this country, even though someone can be born and raised second, third generation Canadian, but that can still look different. Also, for example, touching someone's hair without permission, this just constitutes that, it's this new type of hair that we've never seen before, even though we have so many diverse individuals, and we want to ensure that we're normalizing all the people that we're seeing, because if we're pointing out a difference, it's hinting that this is not something normal in the workplace. And even being surprised at someone's professional success, again, it really shows that you're surprised that someone of their background or their gender or their race has made it this far. So even when they're unintentional, micro insults communicate that someone doesn't meet the norm. And this is what we're really talking about, or that their achievements are unexpected. They reinforce stereotypes and make people feel judged based on their identity rather than their merit. The cumulative effort erodes confidence and belonging. This is a real impact of someone that has faced microaggressions. So it's easy to grasp how hurtful comments can feel, such as when I'm asked if I shower while wearing my hijab, or when I notice non-Muslims assuming I wear hijab because I'm forced or because I have undesirable hair. So because of a lot of comments being made, as Muslim women and individuals, we're seen as the opposite or as something the other and not the norm. And so this testimonial really illustrates how microaggressions, they question basic dignity and autonomy. These comments reveal ignorance and bias while placing the burden on the recipient to educate or defend their choices. Such interactions compound over time, and they create exhausting and they alienate individuals as well. The questions are intrusive, they assume negative motivations, and they treat religious practices as something requiring explanation or justification. So oftentimes, for instance, when we see someone who's wearing something differently or has a bunch of tattoos, for instance, we're not one to question their choices, but when we see someone who is covered up or wearing a hijab, we're quick to question and just really assume, their religious practices require an explanation for them, when in reality it is their own autonomy and their choice to wear what they want and practice the way they want to. So far, we would like you to take a moment and really reflect on what we've spoken about. So how does this connect to your own life or your work? And what are some questions maybe that will help push you to really understand microaggressions on a deeper level? What are some of the reactions or insights that are emerging from you right now? So given that this is a recorded presentation, just stay on the slide, take a moment to really think about how your own thoughts, your own ideas has changed, or even if you've experienced microaggressions, or if you're unconscious and you don't know the harm of what you're saying is, take a moment to think about maybe comments that you've made and how they are impacting others. So as we move forward, we really have to remember that awareness is the first step. Understanding microaggressions is really important, but recognizing them in ourselves and in others requires practice, humility, and commitment. We're all learning here, and we're creating a space for growth without judgment, and it's helping us build a stronger, more inclusive workplace culture. So building awareness together and really addressing microaggressions kind of centers on 4 things. It's for ensuring that we're self-aware, so thinking and questioning our own potential biases and assumptions. We have to ensure that we're actively listening to those that have gone through these experiences and that we're validating their experiences as well. This journey is a continuous journey. Learning is never ends. So essentially we have to commit to really always educating ourselves and improving, and there's never going to be a situation where we've learned everything we could. There's always new experiences that we can go through, or there's individuals that we can hear from, and so being committed to that continuous learning is so essential in this journey of really addressing and understanding microaggressions. And it's really important that we're also opening up spaces for conversations that people feel safe in. And a lot of that learning, as we've spoken about, that continuous learning often happens when we're speaking in an open dialogue with others. So consider how we've all been part of the microaggression dynamic in different ways. By reflecting honestly on our own roles, it really helps us understand the full picture and motivates meaningful change. So think about and reflect how you've experienced microaggression. What did it feel like, and how did it affect your own participation or sense of belonging? Were there moments that you witnessed them? Maybe you've heard a comment or you've seen something. Did you speak up? Did you help? Did you not? What stopped you from that? And are there instances where your words or actions may have caused them, even without you meaning to? So how did you respond when you realized? So take a moment and really consider all these questions to ensure that you're on the right path of learning and recognizing microaggressions and ultimately, stopping and calling them out. In this journey of understanding and exploring what microaggression looks like, it's really important that we're also recognizing environmental microaggressions, and as they exist in the physical and visual spaces around us. These are messages that are seen in things that are displayed or that are not displayed, so in our workplaces, public spaces, and media. These subtle cues often communicate who belongs, who is valued, and whose experience matters. So anytime that you're walking, whether to work or in your community or at a mall, look at the images around you. See, what they are sending to you, what messages they are trying to get to you, and are these visuals appearing welcoming or unwelcoming? Are they excluding an individual or a community? Who could potentially feel marginalized or overlooked by these images? And as we talk about environmental microaggressions, think about all the forms of media that you interact with. So whether it's billboards, whether it's magazines, it's advertisements, it's even people around you, take a look and really try to uncover the hidden meaning in all of those, as they oftentimes show us what the norm is or They send subtle messages that we are ingrained in our subconscious and we only realize it later. So we've spoken a lot about what microaggressions are, but we've talked about how to recognize them, but it's really important to discuss how we can respond. So responding to microaggressions requires courage, skill, and practice. As we've said before, whether you're the target, you're a witness, or someone who's unintentionally caused harm, having concrete strategies empowers you to take action and foster accountability. The goal is progress towards more respectful, inclusive interactions. So some response strategies are to pause and assess safely. So before responding, consider the context and whether it's safe to address the situation directly. You can also ask for clarification. For instance, saying, "What do you mean by that?" As this really prompts the person to reflect on what they said without accusing them of being racist in their comments or, all of that. Third, it's important to name that behavior. So if someone is saying something or you're hearing something, you can say, that comment could be hurtful or that really enforces a stereotype. So again, advocating by calling out what we see. It's important that it's also that we're holding this as a shared impact. So we can focus on effect rather than intent by saying, it feels dismissive when that's said, because that's the impact of these microaggressions. Instead of that they just wanted to hurt me, we can just say, "Oh, well, you're causing me to feel dismissed." And oftentimes that helps a person stop and then rethink about what they're saying. We can also offer alternatives. So if someone, or if you're hearing some type of words, we can offer inclusive wording or a different approach to the conversation to ensure that, we're cutting back on those stereotypes, those biases that we hold, and providing individuals with the right terminology. We can also support the target. So if there's someone around us that has been, impacted by microaggressions, we can check in privately or offer validation and solidarity. And another strategy is really to follow up if needed. So revisit the conversation later if that immediate response wasn't possible or effective. As we've discussed, learning is a continuous journey. It doesn't hurt to always go back and then you can just clarify, you can change the wording on something, or you can help someone learn the truth about something. So these are all just response strategies for when you hear something or when something is said to you or someone around you. Even though we just provided strategies of how to respond, there are often times when we know we can't respond or we're taking time to ourselves to understand the hurt maybe a comment has caused. So if you're the target or if you experience microaggressions, it's important to know that your feelings are valid and then you're not obligated to respond in any way. Your well-being comes first, so you might choose to address it in the moment if you're able to, or you might talk to the person privately later, seek support from colleagues or HR, or simply process it in your own space and time. There are often so many different ways of responding to a microaggression comment, and it really just depends on how you are as a person and what you are comfortable with. So again, it's really important that we're restating this, that your choices matter. There's not one right response. You know your own situation, you know your own person, so consider what feels safe and authentic to you. Some days you might have the energy to educate and others you don't, so you just need to protect your peace, and they're both valid. As individuals, we go through a lot daily. Some days we're able to do more and some days we're able to do less, so it's important that we are taking care of our well-being first and foremost, and then finding ways of addressing what is happening. We also hope that you're seeking support, so connect with trusted colleagues, mentors, employees, resource groups, or professional support services so you're not navigating this alone. Documentation can also be important if patterns are emerging or formal action becomes necessary. So at work, filing an HR report or incident can really help you get that support that's needed. As we've said, self-care is essential. Processing microaggressions takes emotional energy, so make space for activities, relationships, and practices that restore you. If oftentimes you feel that your workplace or the institution you are in is not supportive, knowing that you have support from your family, your friends, others in your community, and making time to do activities that you enjoy can help you, battle with that struggle. And even though we talk a lot about ensuring that individuals are learning and taking time to talk to them about it, you're not always responsible for others' growth. So education is valuable, but you don't owe anyone an explanation or lesson at the expense of your own well-being. For a lot of people, they've been through their whole lives trying to educate everyone, and it comes time where this is why we need policy and other changes in institutions and at different levels, because it should not always be on a person to educate others about what's happening. So ensuring that you put your well-being first and then finding what strategies work for you. So as we've said, sometimes it can be tough to deal with microaggressions if you're the target, but we find that sometimes it's easier if you're a witness. So this is where power comes from allyship. So if you're a bystander, if you witness something, it sends a message to the person that is committing those microaggressions and also to the person that's facing them. Active allyship means using your voice and position to support others and interrupt harmful dynamics. So you can interrupt carefully, say, let's pause here. I want to understand what was just said, or I'm not sure that landed the way you intended. We can call, some comments out that way. We can also redirect the conversation, so move it back to a more professional topic, move it to another topic to stop those conversations from happening. We can also support the target, so if a coworker or a friend has gone through it, just, you can check in on them. You can say, I noticed that comment and that wasn't right. Even just validating their feelings oftentimes is so powerful, as they feel that, maybe they shouldn't consider it that much, or it's fine, it's just another comment being made. But by validating their feelings, we can show them that it really is important that we're standing up against these comments and microaggressions so they stop from happening. And again, really knowing where to address these conversations, whether a public or private space, because it really depends on the person that you're speaking to and the person that's facing it. So on the side, we have a poster, and this is from the University of Toronto Office of Inclusion and Diversity, and this is being an ally that cares. So to consider what was said, to be accountable, rethink, empathize, and support. So moving forward together, creating a truly inclusive workplace is ongoing work that requires commitment from everyone. What we've learned today is just the beginning, and we're hoping that as you leave this workshop, you carry forward your new awareness and commitment to these actions that make a difference. Again, remember to reflect regularly, so really examine your own assumptions, your language, and behaviors. 2 is that continuous learning that never stops. Read, listen, and speak with diverse individuals. You can attend trainings, stay curious, and really learn about others' experiences. If there is something that you do witness, you can speak up. Using your own voice is so powerful in interrupting microaggressions or supporting colleagues. And this is how we can also advocate for inclusive practices. And the 4th is very important, even though it's hard. It's being accountable. We have to realize that we all make mistakes, and when we do, we just acknowledge them and apologize and commit to doing better. So no one's exempt from making mistakes, but it's what comes after that's so essential in how we dismantle a lot of these issues that are happening. Thank you for listening to our workshop today. We deeply appreciate your presence and active participation, even though this was a recorded session. And we're hoping that you've understood, microaggressions, how they manifest, how to stop them. But one key takeaway is that how a lot of this is collective action. We're hoping to empower you and empower those around you so that we can change those spaces and really build more respectful and inclusive workplaces. So together we can do this. And we're hoping that this workshop was informative. If you have any questions, please do reach out to Muslim Children's Aid and Support Services. And thank you again for listening.